Hello, and welcome to Be Indie Now, a podcast for independent game development. I'm your host, Tobiah Marks. With me today is Helen Zeng.
Hey.
And Edgar Miranda via Skype.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So today, the question is, should I get funding for my app? There's a lot of ways to get funding for it, right? You can self-fund it. You can make an app for pretty cheap now, but there's also a lot more solutions for indies to get some money. There's publishers that let you will go to indies now and give them some amount of money, Indie Fund or 100% Indie, which is, I believe, is the Chilingo publisher. And then there's also crowdfunding sources, IndieGoGo, Kickstarter, and money seems like a good idea, but is it right for your app is the real question. Edgar, I know that you're self-funded for your apps. Like, how much do you think an app costs to make nowadays for someone getting into it?
I think that's a good question, and I think the better question is how much is it going to cost you money, and if you're taking into consideration the hours that you're working on this app. So, I think if you're able to, say, get the artwork done, get the programming done, and get the design done, the more work you put into it, the more money you save, but not having to hire an outside artist, or programmer, or anything like that. So with that in mind, I think you can easily build an app with just your own resources very cheaply. Taking, for example, the Corona SDK, which is a software suite to allow any developers to build mobile games fairly quickly versus just using iPhone and Android tools. Using tools like that, you should be able to get a game up and run. As far as cost, I think, if you take into consideration your hourly rate, if you're working, even at $25 an hour for 2 months, that's an $8,000 game.
Yeah, what money that you could be making if you work somewhere else. Exactly. So it depends on if you're doing it as a hobbyist, at the end of the day, you're putting a couple hours in, or if you're saying, all right, I'm going to quit my job, I'm going to run full time, am I going to have enough money for my own living expenses or how much I'm comfortable earning in any given time. And there's a big advantage if you're able to do everything yourself, if you're able to do the art and the programming, and the tools are there now that everyone can learn to do those things. I'm bad at art myself, but people can do that. And Helen, I know you've made an app and you did everything yourself, right? You did the programming and the art.
Yeah, I mean, it was a simpler HTML5 game, but I've been playing around with Photoshops for a long time, so I just made some vector art, and that turned out to be pretty helpful. I mean, people mostly compliment me on the artwork. So,
what kind of tools did you use to make it? Did you use Photoshop? But that costs money, but.
Yeah, so Photoshop costs money. Luckily, there's Creative Cloud that people can use now, which it costs, I think, $35 per month for Photoshop itself, or like $50 a month for all the tools altogether. So I mean, it's some cost in the short run, but I think that's actually easier to swallow than, say, a couple $1,000s up front for the entire license.
There's also free tools like GIMP, right? That has pretty much all the features of Photoshop.
I tried GIMP, and it was not to the point where I could use it.
Yeah. I mean, GIMP has all the features up until maybe like Photoshop 5 or 6, but that is, like 10 years ago or something now.
I mean, but like for simple graphic stuff, I mean, you're talking about someone who's not a professional artist. Yeah. And I guess professional is relative, right? You might be a professional artist, but for what you need for making a game, just getting a simple image, editing a screenshot, editing some art assets, GIMP does everything you need. It can be a little bit harder to use, but is that worth, like, okay, I need to put in that $35, even though you technically can use GIMP?
I think GIMP is useful for a lot of the assets editing and for creating a lot of screenshots, just doing minor fixes. But in terms of actually creating assets, I think like in Inkscape, which is same thing, like open source, but
for vector art.
Yeah, so open source Illustrator. Yeah. That's a lot more helpful, and I think actually someone I know, Kenny, on my team here at Microsoft, he created a game that earned I think like $250,000, and he did all the assets just using Inkscape. So yeah, it works for some people.
It makes sense. I mean, I've used Inkscape myself, and doing vector art is really smart too, because it can make really smooth looking stuff, really kind of that professional logo corporate kind of stuff fairly easy in vector,
Yeah.
and then you can scale it to any resolution whenever you're putting it in any game. So you
Yeah.
don't have to worry about that work. I mean, it's just vectors are a good idea in general.
Yeah.
But Edgar had a good point about the cost, right? So it's like, okay, your cost of your own time putting in, but there's also a cost of your time where if you can get something done in free tools and it takes you X many hours, but you can get it done in less than an hour if you use another tool. Like, yeah, there's like GIMP, but you have other ones like Texture Packer is a tool that I particularly like that creates a sprite sheet really easily. And that amount of work to do that manually would take me hours, and that program gets it done in 30 seconds. But they charge money for it. I actually forgot how much. I think it's like $10 or $20 or something like that. But that cost
Pays for itself at the end.
Yeah, it's worth investing that little bit of money in. So you get some amount of budget for tools. Probably most of the stuff you can be free. What other costs do you have as being an indie developer? I know for when you submit to stores, most stores take a fee.
Yeah, so I think Apple's is
$100.
$100 per
Yeah,
year.
per year.
Android is around $20 per year, and I think it's the same for Windows. Windows Store is $100 per year as well.
It's $100 per year, but they also have programs if you're a startup and you started within the last 5 years and you're making less than $1 million, I think it is. You qualify for the BizSpark program, which is another thing Microsoft has to give free software and free tools to developers, and one of those things to get you free Windows Phone account. So
Yeah,
that's one of the ways to save money.
Yeah, that's true. Windows Phone and Windows 8, and then you can have like Office and things like that for if. I don't really think you need that for game development, to be honest.
Well,
but
it depends on the
useful
game. Actually, Excel
yeah.
is one of the best game design tools out there. Actually.
Yeah, and I've seen some pretty impressive games made in Excel too.
In Excel.
What was that, Kenny? Windows Phone is 19. Right. Windows Phone costs $19 a year, and Windows 8 costs $99 a year. Just correction off camera there. Want to get our numbers right. But still, you can get that free. There's other ways to get free tools as well. I mean, there are some tools out there that you can email the author and say, hey, I'm a developer, I'm indie. Do you have either maybe a discount? Maybe, hey, if you give me this discount / free trial period, I will then write up about your tool in my blog post, my Twitter. If you have a following already, that's already great right there. But a lot of those guys, they're looking for advertising to developers. They want developers to say, oh man, it is totally worth using this tool over doing it yourself. And they're desperate to get developers to give them that kind of personal recommendation. So sometimes you can get comped stuff if you just take some time to email it the right people. I mean, that's not a guarantee and you shouldn't plan on it, but it's something else to do.
I mean, even some of the bigger known tools, I think now even for Unity, for the Android, Windows, and iPhone development, those are actually released for free. And I think what they're doing is the base is free, but if you want the advanced features, those are kind of what cost the license.
Yeah, I think they actually changed it back so that Android and Windows are paid. So it's free for desktop development, free for Windows 8 app development, free for Windows Phone development, and then everything else you'll have to pay for that module. But usually it used to cost, you had to pay thousands just to get those basic features. So that reduces the cost to free for most platforms and then cheap for the others, which is pretty good. Game Maker is free for desktop and for Windows 8, but it has some limited features, and then you can buy the full version and get more features, or then buy for specific platforms you want to get on Windows Phone or Android or iOS, depending on what you release to. Corona, I know, is free now with some limited features, and you can pay for the full features. I'm not sure if it's limited platform on Corona. I'll have to double check.
And I think even for I believe for Unity, you can still test the application on your.
For testing purposes,
phones.
Most of them will be open. It's just when you actually get to release the app.
So I think that's great in the sense that you can actually develop and test and run it up to the point where you're ready to release, and then you can make the investment of buying that license. Versus, I know sometimes you can get very ambitious and want to make this great game, and it'd be sad that you put all this money up front, and at the end of the day, you decided not to do it or go with a different tool set. So I think with that available, and it also allows you to try different tool sets to see what you really need. Do you need a 3D game? Do you want to go with Unity, or do you need something more basic like Corona for 2D development?
So let's talk about contractors, another cost that you might have. So let's just say you're not as awesome as I guess some of us are, where we're doing everything. Or let's use me as an example. I'm horrible at art, right? So I've done games solo, and when it came to the art, I had to hire a contractor because the art that I can make exists, but it's just not pretty. Is that reasonable to hire a contractor? Edgar, have you ever hired a contractor for Miranda Brothers?
Yeah, and we had experience hiring someone locally, even within our vicinity, and someone within the U.S. and also people from outside the U.S. And there's pros and cons. Obviously, we used a product similar to Odesk, which I think Tobiah you have used.
Yeah, I've used Odesk a lot.
With Odesk, it can get really, really affordable and really cheap. And the con with that is you really got to go through all the applicants and see what works and what doesn't, because a lot of them are cheap for a reason, and that's because they can't do artwork. So you kind of got to go through the haystack and find your golden needle, and that for some people that worked out really well. Obviously, one of the better things with having someone in-house is you're able to communicate with them. You're able to kind of see face-to-face and really get your ideas across. So a lot of it depends on what you want and kind of how much money you're willing to spend. Obviously, if you have someone locally, you're not going to be able to pay them $2 an hour for their work. So it comes with its pros and cons on that.
How much does a contractor cost? I mean, an artist, I know my experience, if you're hiring one of a good skill level where you'll get good but not great art, you can have a budget of $20 an hour and get an artist of pretty decent skill. Probably not a U.S. artist, but you can still get one in that level. What other types of contractors have you hired, Edgar?
I think with you mentioning that, I agree. You won't be able to get a really good artist for $20 an hour. But if you really look around, especially schools where there's really really talented students that want to get some work out there and put it on their portfolio, you might be able to strike some sort of deal where they can get their name in the credits and stuff, get a portfolio and still pay them. But yeah, I mean, I agree. You kind of get what you pay for as far as artwork, and $20 is. 2015 is probably around the line where you're looking to get art. So
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I actually really like 99 Designs. I don't know if either of you use that.
Oh yeah, I haven't used it. Tell us about it.
Yeah, 99 Designs is a really, really good thing for basically commissioning artwork or commissioning more basic designs. Nothing as complex as something that you'd maybe use in game, but certainly a lot of graphics or logos. And you basically say a couple of specifications, like I would like a logo to have roughly these things, it would have these characteristics, and people just submit designs into you, and you can review basically a bunch of designs that people have submitted and pick one to pay out, and you would have a bounty, of course, on that design. So
and the more that you're offering, the more likely a better artist will come and do that request.
Yeah, exactly. And you can also set your own budget more easily that way.
That's also a great option. And also, I wanted to say, Edgar, thanks for bringing up hiring college students. For my game, once we got popular, we started wanting to make more levels more quickly, and it got to the point where we just didn't have the manpower. So we ended up hiring college students for, I think, like $10 an hour plus pizza to come to my living room and set them up on computers and make tons of levels for us. So like $10 an hour you're going to be hard pressed to hire anyone of any skill level at that rate. But if you hire college students, they were more than happy to do that, because not only did they get paid, they got food, and then the next week they had levels out in our app. And I know a couple of them have gotten jobs thanks to being able to put that in that resume. So they're more than happy to do that.
And what I've heard from other people also is, in relation to college, just having interns where you can kind of bring someone in and prep them and work them around what you want them to do for the long run. And with the with the promise that if you guys get bigger, you'll be able to pay or hire them or bring them on full time. So that works out real great. And like I said, it's kind of like a give and take. You give them the experience, so they'll give you your time to work on your game.
Sounds good. So we talked about the things what it would cost to get into development. It's hard to put an exact number because it depends on what kind of game you're making, what skill levels you have, what skills you'll need to hire. But say you figure out your budget, you figure out what you need, you decide, I do need funding. Right? There's one thing is like I can fund it myself, but now that you figure out you do need funding, what do you do there? Do you just make a pitch and put it out there on Kickstarter, or do you have to develop the game a bit first? I don't have much experience with crowdfunding myself, but it seems that the games there, they're not just, oh, here's my idea, or at least the ones like that don't get funded as well. They tend to have some type of prototype there first. They tend to have some basic game that they've worked on themselves, and they've gotten to a certain point, and they're like, oh, well, to continue development, I'll need this much more, rather than from scratch. But I know that there's some ones that were from scratch. I mean, there's been games where there's no idea whatsoever, like the Double Fine one.
Yeah, and they managed to raise something like $3.3 million, which is crazy.
Yeah, but
Although
I mean, they had the recognition, right? So if you have, Ron Gilbert and Tim Schafer working on your app, you could just say that, and people will throw money your way. Which, I mean, to an extent that could be a fair argument, that if you have a certain celebrity endorsement, or you have some reason why some people will want to put money into it without seeing the product ahead of time, you can do that. I know I've talked with some people about doing contract apps for big companies. I never actually went through with those contracts, so I can't speak about how they work, but I've pitched games, and they were okay with just kind of a detailed design document, a couple-page elevator pitch. Maybe that was because we already had some experience at that point, but people tend to want to see something before they'll throw money at your way, especially if you're talking, over $10,000. It's people don't kind of give that without a idea that you have a clue of what you're doing and you'll be able to be on budget.
Yeah, I mean, I think something as simple as the demo video is good enough most of the time for Kickstarter, not just with games, but really with anything that they put on there, or that any project that they put on Kickstarter. So I think just having a video, having an idea of what art, what gameplay you want is often good enough.
Yeah, I think the presentation on Kickstarter has to be one of the bigger values that people get at it. I feel like like you mentioned, Tobiah, even if you don't have a demo or a prototype, if you can present the idea well with some concept art, or how it's going to play out, people really seem to jump on that and say, wow, this game has a new innovative idea. I think they had a game called Code Hero a while ago that got a pretty good amount of funding, that was supposed to teach you how to make a game within a game. Mm-hmm. And that got a big chunk of it. And I think at the time they either had a small demo or no demo at all. But I think also the kind of the idea or your innovation into the area is what kind of brings the money in along, or from a Kickstarter perspective.
Yeah, but a huge part of that is also being able to get that publicity for your Kickstarter page, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you can have a demo, you can not have a demo, you can have great concept art, but if you can't get the traffic to your Kickstarter page, at the end of the day, that's sort of futile, especially because if you don't reach your goal, it's all kind of for naught.
Well, it's the presentation is doubly important, because not only good presentations, good no matter what. It's good, good app, good presentation. People are more likely to download it. Yeah. But it also shows that you're capable of producing quality work. If your presentation is a little bit rough around the edges, if your presentation lacks polish, that last 10% polish, you're not getting paid to make a good presentation. You're showing what you can do. So your presentation needs to have that polish. It needs to have a good quality audio. It needs to have all these extra things to say, I can do quality work, and the final product of what you're going to pay me money is going to look, it's obviously not, you're making a game versus a video or whatever kind of presentation is, but it still has that sense of showing off what you can do.
Yeah.
Another thing to factor in is rewards. Some people will back based on different rewards. You don't want to just put up, people will only pay $1 or $2 for my game, so I'm only asking for $1 or $2 each person. You can easily scale more rewards. People are willing to pay more to see a game exist. In a sense, you're kind of pre-searching for those whales, right? Those players are more likely to give you money, and in exchange, like, if you give me $20 for this game that maybe is only going to be worth $1 or $2 when it comes out, you'll get a T-shirt, or you'll get extra buttons, or a signed poster, or all those things. But that's a catch-22, right? Because if you do that too much, if you have too many rewards, you're taking in your budget. So you have to factor in how much are my costs, and then how much are my costs minus all the have to pay for the T-shirt printing, which is not cheap, and pay for poster shipping, and what about international shipping? It can be a big problem. You guys, there's also companies like IndieGoGo. Have you used IndieGoGo more than Kickstarter, or for backing?
I've used Kickstarter more, but actually, to that point, I've noticed that a lot of people, a simple a higher reward level can just be, hey, you get to be, a top or featured backer of this project, and at the end of the game, when we roll some of the credits, your name will be featured first. And sometimes that's enough for people if they're really
virtual rewards are really great to give out because they cost you nothing, right? If you can find some system to give people 1 million coins for backing $1,000, right, then you could just make that 1 million coins no problem.
Yeah. But I think the difference between IndieGoGo and Kickstarter, if I'm not mistaken, is that for IndieGoGo, even if you don't get up to exactly your contribution goal, you still get that funding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's this pro and con, right? So in Kickstarter, you have a goal. You have to make $10,000 or whatever you set your goal is. And if you make that much, everyone pays. And if you don't make that much, nobody pays. So the idea is you set the minimum amount it would take for you to make the project. But IndieGoGo, you can just pay for the project, but you can offer the same rewards for an IndieGoGo. So I've seen people shoot themselves in the foot where they set up their IndieGoGo because they think, oh, well, I want to be able to get the money no matter what. If I set for a goal for 10,000, I'll make 8,000. I'll still make it because it's my passion project and I'll put my own money in. But then they'll get like $2,000, and now that 2,000, however many people put in, need all these rewards, and it just doesn't become economical, and they're wasting lots of money having to do T-shirt runs, but they only needed 10 T-shirts or whatever.
So I think at that point, now you're making a $10,000 game for $2,000, right? The number of, it doesn't cost any more to make more units of your game, but those customers that paid are still expecting the same game that you presented for the $10,000 crowd.
Yeah, I mean, it's even worse because you have all the rewards, because you're not just paying $10,000. Oh, this is my budget for the game. You have to budget in the cost that Kickstarter and IndieGoGo take. It's some percentage, the cost for all the rewards. Overfunding is also a problem.
Yeah.
There's apps that get funded. In fact, the Double Fine Kickstarter is a good one to talk about this. They were looking for 400,000, I believe, and they got 3.3 million. And that game has been going longer than it was originally estimated, and is well over budget than originally estimated because it scaled up so much. They had so many people, so many rewards, and they thought, oh, we have all this money, we should make the game this much bigger and better, that it just takes longer for development. I've heard of games that they have to add more features, and it takes much longer than anticipated, which makes all the Kickstarter backers unhappy.
Yeah, so I think they're actually going to Steam now, on one of those platforms to get more money, and they're not slated for release till like 2014, which is crazy.
Yeah,
but
you always had the Slacker backers to get more money after the fact. You get a PayPal account going after your Kickstarter to fund it. There for people who didn't make it within the Kickstarter window, but that's one of those success problems. Like, oh, how poor you had money. But it's a good problem to have, but at the same time, you have to think about it because you could bankrupt yourself. If, like, say you look for $10,000 in your game and you get $100,000, you might actually bankrupt yourself if you didn't plan ahead and how you'll scale up, and if you'll have enough people to hire it, and if you won't be able to implement all your features in a timely manner, or even just being able to manage printing how many thousand T-shirts and posters that is at that point to actually get them all out, could end up costing more than that.
Yeah, but I think that's why I think Kickstarter especially has a really good policy on like making sure you only show what you've already built, and not claiming that for example you have like a working demo, a working prototype, when it's in fact just like a video, because that's really important for yourself, I think, as well, to not overpromise and underdeliver, basically. And I think at the point where you have a more fleshed out vision and then you're going to Kickstarter, you also won't have the Double Fine problem of not having even enough of a concept to know what your game will cost in the end.
Another way to fund games, if you're not doing crowdfunding like Kickstarter and IndieGoGo, is you could try theming your game towards something and making it kind of a commercial game. I'm not sure what the correct term for this is, but making the Doritos app, right? Or and there's a lot of successful indie developers right now who'll have a game and then they'll get bought out by a company and they'll release the some themed version. Like Angry Birds Rio, right, is a great example. That Angry Birds Rio, I think, was more popular than the Rio movie. We talked a little bit about those last week, but that is a good way to fund your game projects, because you can get a game and say, oh, this would be a cool, fun game, and maybe if you change around the artwork, change who the main character is, going off an existing IP, can make the money. It's just making those business contacts really hard. I mean, I wouldn't know where to start. Edgar, do you have any idea how you would start to find those people?
You know what, I don't, and I think I have to agree with you. It's more about the context, and a lot of it has to be about, if you're getting offered, from the Doritos company to make a game, they're not just going to pick out anybody from the game dev community, right? They want to make sure you can deliver, that you have experience on it, because it's their branding on the line. So I think you're right. You kind of had to know the people and probably worked with those companies before. Some of those. I think in Corona they had I think you mentioned the Doritos app, and then there was the Shack app that they also created. So I think it all comes down to kind of who you know and who your connections are.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to get a guest on who can speak to that at some point in the future. But hopefully that gives you guys out there some ideas of how you can fund your apps. If it's reasonable to self-fund, we talked a little bit about numbers and costs. And, I would say just as a starting point, if you can do most of your app yourself, maybe a couple little contractors out there, and your game is not too complicated, you could easily do it for under $1,000. But depending on how many more contractors you need and what more art and what time frame you want to get done in, that could easily balloon to many thousands depending on where it wants to go.
Yeah.
So at this point, I want to talk about what games we've been playing this week. I still played a little bit of GTA 5, but so I was traveling this week. I started playing Virtue's Last Reward. I've been playing it for a bit, but I still haven't gotten to the end of it. It's this really cool Japanese puzzle visual novel game, sequel to 99 Doors. And I've been every time I travel, I pull that out and been getting just a few more minutes into it. It's got 15 different endings, so I have to replay it over and over again. So that's what I've been playing this week. What about you, Helen?
This last week, I've actually been playing. It's weird to say this because I've been testing out some of Felix, who was the guest last week's game for Austin Zombie Shooter.
Yeah.
So
Actually, Felix wasn't on last week, but he'll be on pretty soon.
Just joking.
Yes. Fair enough. Felix Reisberg, he makes this game called Awesome Zombie Shooter for Windows 8.
Mm-hmm.
I've played it. It's a good game.
Yeah, it is a good game. And I've just been testing out his game and looking for bugs.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't really call it playing. I would call it helping out a friend.
Yeah, it's part playing, part working, right? That. What about you, Edgar? What have you been playing this week?
I've been playing, like I mentioned before, I've been getting a lot into board games. I've been playing the computer version of Race to the Galaxy. So that's keeping me pretty busy and pretty fun. Also, I was a big fan of Kingdom Rush. It was a pretty popular tower defense type of game on the iOS store, and they just came out with Kingdom Rush Kingdoms, I think, which is basically the part 2. So I've been going through that and been trying to pass a campaign mode for that. So it's really fun. They got a nice twist on the tower defense where you can put out land units to kind of block in the waves. So it's kind of a mix between offense and defense as far as tower defense games are concerned.
That sounds like fun. I'll have to check it out.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
All right, if you want to find more about me, you can go to tobiahmarks.com. It's just my name.com, or get me on Twitter at Tobiah Marks. So, again, should be pretty easy to find. What about you, Helen? Where can we find more about you?
The easiest way to find me is on Twitter. I'm at HWZ, my initials.
Pretty good. Get that three-letter three-letter Twitter handle is pretty handy. What about you, Edgar? Where can we find more about you?
You guys, you can find out about me through my company website, mirandabros.com. I also have edgarmiranda.net with kind of an old blog, but probably mirandabros.com. You can see some of the games I've been working on and any update through the company.
Sounds good. If you want to find more episodes of Be Indie Now, you can go to beindienow.com. That's BEINDIENOW.com. We'll have all the lists up there, when we'll be live streaming, when the next episode is, and all the previous episodes as well. And with that, I think that's the show. So go out there and go make some games.